Hello. Hello and welcome to the second part of the Hive structure and swarm theory video series for Demand Utopia. So last time where we left off, we talked a little bit about, in our very first video, an overview of how the Hive works. And our second video, we talked a little bit about swarm theory, just real briefly went into some movements that have used that model before. Talked about our mission statement, which was and is to establish popular direct democracies across the world in the face of this decaying, disastrous, capitalist, proto-fascist, totalitarian state nightmare that we are currently living under, and towards advancing ethics of social ecology, social justice, non-hierarchy, and cooperative economy. So, from there, we talked a little bit about the unique role that we play towards that goal, because obviously we can't do that ourselves, and it's going to take millions of people to do it. Ecology of movements, or an ecosystem of movements, working together, filling different niche roles, just as plants and animals do in their ecosystem. And so our niche role in Demand Utopia is of radical imagination, revolutionary culture, and creative militancy. From there, we talked about the different phases that we see this happening, that could take different amounts of times, and each phase could take longer, some could take shorter. Our first phase is a community development phase, to community control, to coalition, to taking power in phase 4. So our last part that we just talked about before we left off was just some of the general kind of organizing principles of the Hive, of the swarm, of Demand Utopia, and the way that we're trying to organize in this unique swarm kind of model that actually isn't totally new, but it's used a whole lot. So in that sense, it is unique. So anyways, and those being speed, transparency, trust, and scalability. So again, we think that all of these different kind of little ingredients will help us build towards our goal of, revolutionary, directly democratic change. So in order to get there, we have to talk about decision making. So with this video, we're going to talk about that. Membership, how we do membership, get into the generals on our structure. So we'll talk about a little bit about the General Assembly, our cipher, pods, polis, and zonas, teams, the way that teams work, and roles, and then leads. And then in the next video, we'll talk about policies. So that's what we're going to be covering. So with our decision-making model, again, we're working with a swarm structure. So in the swarm structure, which is about crowdsourcing and kind of mass inclusion, it's trying to remove the barriers to access, to people to get organized, to start participating in an organization. And so with that, we have a couple different key kind of principles to our decision-making process. One is the 3 utopian rule, the vote with your time and energy, and the law of 2 feet. So the 3 utopian rule is if 3 utopians agree, or 3 members of Demand Utopia, to an action, then they can act in the name of the organization, so long as at least 3 other utopians agree to an action. No permission is necessary. Acting without permission is acting with accountability. All utopians are empowered to own this organization. We hold each of us to the code of the Geshe. We'll get into the code of the Geshe in a little bit. The code of the Geshe is the idea, is basically our points of unities and our code of ethics at large in Demand Utopia. So we'll get into that in a later video. So the idea here is that as long as we are all united behind wanting the same thing, striving towards the same goal, and have this general kind of strategic outline of creative militancy, radical imagination, and revolutionary cultural development, we can stay united in the methods that we use. And we'll get into a little bit more of the specifics with our policy later. So if we trust each other, that we have the same goals, that we have a common understanding of the common methods that we'll use to achieve those goals, then we can move in confidence with allowing other people to go forth and organize under the organization's name without permission. And of course, there's positives and negatives to this model, in that we can't control what everybody does with the name Demand Utopia. So there's bound to be disagreements, and but we hope that we can. We think that the positives outweigh the negatives, and so while we may have our disagreements, we're also we always have the law of 2 feet, which we'll get into later. So the three utopian rules, followed by the fact that this is a volunteer organization. So no one's paid here. No one's required to be involved in Demand Utopia. People choose to be here. So the focus is always on what people can do and never what people cannot do. So what we try to, so that brings us to our next point, which is voting with your time and energy. So we want to build a culture where influence is achieved by individual leadership and individual appreciation. If you think something needs to be done, you just do it without asking anybody. If other people think that your initiative is good, they will join in of their own accord. If not, they go elsewhere. Thus, the person taking an appreciated initiative gains immediate influence, which gives the swarm as a whole a tremendous amount of momentum and learning speed. So we understand that influence accrues in organizations, and we think that influence should be accrued through the efforts that people take to work towards our collective goal, which is revolutionary change towards direct democracy. So the next rule is the law of 2 feet. It is every activist's right and responsibility to go where he or she feels he or she can contribute the most, and at the same time get the most in return as an individual. If there is no such place in this particular swarm of Demand Utopia, or a different cipher, or a pod, or a grouping within, you can always leave and go to a different one. So the idea is that voting with your time and energy, and with your 2 feet. So if you don't like what somebody is doing, start your own initiative. Do something else that gets more attention and more moves things in a better direction. If you don't like the direction that somebody else is taking, we should, our points of unity and our which is the code of the Geshe, and our common focus that we're all here together to achieve, should keep us working together and in healthy, positive, and productive ways. And we'll talk about a little bit about like the Geshe and policies on how we treat each other in organizing in a subsequent video. So the last point here with decision making is within defined cipher groups. So these are groups when you just say, hey, I've got this awesome project idea. I'm going to go and make this really cool poster, and I want to put it around. I've got my 2 or 3 friends to come out with me and do it. When you have that cipher group or that unit that you're working with, we encourage people to strive for consensus. So strive for a situation where we have as few losers as possible, because when we have to resort to voting, we often end up with situations where we have people who fundamentally don't agree with the direction, and that creates losers who doesn't feel good to be in that situation. So we want to strive for, in those groups, always try to come to a general agreement on what we're doing, and then only vote when it's necessary. So if major disagreements occur, people are encouraged again to start your own cipher, start your own pod. We'll talk about ciphers and pods, but those again are the kind of basic common organizing unit in Demand Utopia. So, all right, next up is membership. So in order to be involved in Demand Utopia, we have some pretty basic criteria. So they've agreed to follow the tenets of the Geshe, which is our points of unity, agreed to follow the Hive bylaws. So that document is on the Hive, kind of going over it here together. And the next is to participate in a DU orientation. So that's listening to these videos and coming out to one of the online or in-person orientations, and out to a meeting at a local, or there's local meetings happening. So you come out to those or come and participate in one of our online orientations. And once you do that, you're considered a full member. So full membership means that you're able to act under the name, as long as you got, again, the rule of 3 utopians met, and you're able to go forth and organize. So members who earn the rank of the Green One through earning the Green One badge may gain admin access upon the request to certain platforms or access to high security information / groups. So the Green One is a badge that you can earn. So if you're on the Hive and you want to check out our list of different badge options, as long as you earn 3 different badges and you're vetted by vouched for by 2 other people who already have that status, you're able to become a Green One. And this is to protect certain information and passwords and things. If we just allowed, it's just a certain level of security, because with our admin access to the back end of the website, things like that, if we granted that to just anybody, we would jeopardize, somebody coming along and easily just, crashing a lot of the stuff and work that we've put in. So while we have most of our social media and stuff set up so that anybody can get on there, there's just a few certain things that we have to try to keep a little bit more confidential and secure. So the way that you can gain access to that stuff is by getting vetted and earning that badge. So it is still open to everyone. It's just a certain level of trust that needs to be accrued through taking action and doing things. So the next part we're going to come to is structure. So here we'll talk about the General Assembly, and how that works, cipher pods, policies, and zonas, which is our basic organizing units, and then teams, and roles, and leads. All right. So I'm going to exit out of this awesome fish video and show you some charts. So this is in the document. If you're looking over the document around, that's great too. So the first part of this is General Assembly. So I'm going to scroll down here to this image. So here's kind of a chart that lays out our different organizational units. So at our basic level, we have the ciphers, and then we move up to the pods, polis, zona, and then General Assembly here at the top, and then we have teams here. So if you remember in our last video when we talked about intercommunal teams, so these are what the that's what these are here. These are our intercommunal teams, and they support the organization at large. So they are operating off of, from anybody from any different level can come and participate in those and take the lead and go forth. And they operate off of the the kind of phases and goals that we set at our annual General Assembly. And when those goals or anything changes, it will change in this document as well. So they're operating off of this kind of collective agreement, the General Assembly, when those were created, and off of what people themselves decide to do. So at the basis, we're always operating within the confines of the rules and the structure and the scaffolding of the structure and of our collective agreements. So we can do it whatever you want as long as you follow the Three Utopian rule, so long as it's in line with our collective agreements, with this document, with our code of ethics and so on. So again, what we'll do is we have a General Assembly. So the General Assembly will meet once a year, and it's open to everyone who has the Green 1 status. Everyone can come out there, and we can review. We review our structure, bylaws, anything that needs to be changed is changed. Assess where we're at with our goals and objectives, and see if we need to reassess anything, where we need to sharpen stuff up. It's kind of a moment to reflect. And we also have the ability to, appoint people to certain things from there, create new teams that help guide things along. So the General Assembly is kind of the annual touchstone that it happens once a year. From there, we'll talk about the Cypher, Pods, Polis, and Zonas. So if you remember in the first video when we reviewed the Hive, we talked about the importance of the groups. So these are our different groupings in Demand Utopia. So the Cypher, Pods, Polis, and Zonas, you can see that those are here. And these are generally the Pods, Polis, and Zona. These will generally happen on a geographic level. Okay, so this a pod may be a whole neighborhood, it may be a whole city, depending on how many people are involved, and so on and so forth with each of these. And then the teams, again, as we mentioned before, we can have teams for each of the geographies. So maybe we have all of these teams in one zona or one polis, or a few of them in these different team roles in a pod, serving a specific neighborhood or city or region. And again, we have the scaffolding moving upwards towards the General Assembly here of the different teams that support the broader organization. So we have options. This is an organic flow, and it's nothing is totally set when you start off in your local geographies. So you can develop different teams where you want. Okay, so we'll go to this image here and talk about the Cypher. So again, the Cypher is kind of the basic organizing unit in Demand Utopia. It's 3 to 7 people, and that's because research has shown that once you go beyond 7 people, the number of relationships that you have to balance, and because of those different interactions, gets to be like over 35. And once that happens, it's really hard for a person to keep track of that. So 3 to 7 people is like the basic working group number, and then that's the Cypher. So in the swarm, working groups will form by themselves left and right to accomplish subtasks of our overall vision. Subtasks we haven't even identified yet. This is part of how a swarm works and why it can be so effective. The basic organizing unit of this swarm is the cipher. These may be permanent working groups created to facilitate ongoing tasks, such as running an email list, or they may be only temporary to accomplish a specific task or campaign. Likewise, they may be based in a neighborhood as a general organizing unit, like an affinity group, or they may come together online over the Hive to accomplish some kind of at-large task. Different ciphers may then come together to form a pod. So here's a pod. Several pods, a polis, and several polises, a zona. Each higher level is comprised of many of the smaller parts. A pod may form around a campaign with many supporting ciphers, around a geographic area with cipher support teams and more localized ciphers. The same can be said to polis and zonas depending on scale. So again, our basic unit is the cipher. You can start a cipher as long as you got 3 people. You can start it for anything, anywhere, however you want. If you have multiple if your cipher starts growing really big, say you started your Demand Utopia chapter or cipher out in Texas, Austin or something, and you started your group, you got your 3 people together, great. It's working really well. You start getting more and more people involved. Suddenly you're having meetings that are having 20 people come out. Well, at that point, you say, okay, well, what are the different roles that what are the different functions that we're doing here? What are our specific goals in our community we're trying to achieve? And you can form basically working groups or new ciphers around those goals. And then organically, what you may have created is a pod. So at that point, you have several different ciphers who have maybe more specific goals that are aligned around people's unique skills and roles, which we talked about a little bit in our first video, and we'll talk about more in a second as well. So each cipher also will have kind of a ring of people around it, like this within it, that maybe fill certain roles and have certain strengths. So if you get more people, sometimes it might be a good idea to group them up so they can into their own cipher. Maybe that's focused around creating for instance, Austin media page or Facebook social media page where you're advertising your group and starting to do outreach. So you have some people who are really good on that, doing a cipher around that, and you have some people doing another group on action that's focusing on the action side of the campaign for your pod. So you can have different roles like that, and it's scaling up. So it's about scalability again, as we mentioned in the last video. So here you can see the different numbers, the ideal numbers in each one of these formations. Okay. All right. Hopefully that all makes sense. So the next thing we have here are teams. Again, teams down here. Teams can form under any geography for any reason. Teams are just another type of cipher. It's just a way of thinking about a cipher that's not based in a geography. That's serving a more of a particular specific role. So it's just another piece of vocabulary. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about roles. So we'll just focus in here on this infographic. So all members of Demand Utopia should choose 1 or 2 primary roles that they would like to fill. These roles help groups get a feel for what general interests and skills the individual within it may have. It can also help with assessing what kinds of projects groups may be suited to take on or who they need to recruit. Ciphers and teams can then be created with an understanding of which types of roles it will need. Okay. So again, we mentioned in our first video, the importance of picking out a role for yourself. So we have these kind of general archetypes here. Again, the fungi, the guardian of the DNA, strategist, seeking to initiate the extension of the organization. So these people are doing kind of the infrastructural work, the networking, keeping up the website, that sort of thing. They're the sort of infrastructural backbone, networking backbone. So we've already said those terms. Next is prophetics. So these are truth seekers and artists. They have ability to discern the spiritual and spatial realities in a given situation or community. So these are people who are creatively minded, people who are good at communicating and passionate about communicating and spreading the word of what we're doing, whether that's soapboxing or speech writing. And so that is the prophetics role. So again, some of the different teams or things they might do is an art team, meme team, communications team. So that's like video, that sort of thing. Next is growers. So these are people who are good at recruiting others to the cause, and they sense the urgency of the movement. So with the growers, so these are for people who are interested in bringing in more people, taking action, keeping people like motivated around the urgency and seriousness about what we're doing. So you might have people that are interested in fundraising and growing our resources, or street outreach, or action teams and campaign teams that are planning kind of on the ground stuff. So the hive keepers, these people gain influence by nurturing, protecting, and caring for people. So they may be song and dance that keep spirits up, medical team, community defense. They may be doing documentation that's taking care of all of the different kind of recording or secretarial needs that an organization has, or your group or your cipher pod may need, note-taking, that kind of thing. Sage. So these are people with the ability to reveal and communicate the wisdom of the movement. So teachers, people that are interested in making training material, all of that kind of thing. People are interested in doing orientations for new members. All of that kind of stuff is for sages. So one of the things we have with that is Demand Utopia Live. So some people might find themselves fitting into a couple different of these categories, but again, the important thing here is thinking about the different ingredients that your project is going to need of the different roles here. So this little color wheel of roles. Every initiative is going to need maybe more or less of a certain one, but all of our groups should strive to have like some kind of balance of these different roles inside of within them, because without them, we end up losing really important essential components. So without the fungi, we end up, we may lose the ability of doing, keeping up with our emails. Without growers, we end up not bringing more people into the movement. So every initiative is kind of best served with a little bit of each. And if you see yourself not growing, maybe you look around and say, well, who here is a grower and has that role, and you see that there's not a lot, there's your answer. Maybe you need to bring in more people like that. So that's kind of the function here with that, with the roles, and as a way to just keep track of our different skills and abilities, and also emphasizing the fact that we will all accrue influence differently, and we all do different things and have different passions and carry different skill sets. And oftentimes in organizing, a few of these roles get really focused on as the most important, but in reality, we need them all to have a collective whole that's really successful, keeping people together, moving towards our goals. So it's important to acknowledge that, and that You know, people, if you see people who have influence in an organization, in this organization, hopefully it's because they've gained it from, you know, taking action and being supportive and working towards those goals again in the ways that they're able to. So I'm going to real quick return to the coral reef video because I think it's pretty cool. And it's nice to have a cool video like this, like, as opposed to just text, which you can look at on your own if you'd like. So again, the next part is leads. So basically in all of our different Cypher units, so all of our different teams are they're ciphers, right? They're ciphers in of themselves. In all of our different forms, going up to policies, we should also have leads. So actually, I'm gonna go back to that image real quick. So here again are our leads. So any one of your groups should have 1 to 3 different leads. So leads are point people. They're people who are being tasked with bottom lining your initiative, of seeing it through, of making sure it happens, of keeping people motivated towards those goals, of sending out those reminders, and, you know, poking people and saying, hey, you know, you said you're going to do this. They're the people that are motivated and going to keep people, you know, moving in an upward trajectory towards accomplishing those goals. So all organizing units should delegate between 1 and 3 people to be project leads or bottom liners. This helps by creating point people who have the responsibility of seeing that an initiative meets its goals. One key insight is that the responsibility of the Cypher leads is not so much managerial as it is janitorial. Nobody answers to them, and their task is to make sure that the swarm has everything it needs to self-organize and work its miracles. Leadership in a swarm is received through inspiring others, standing up, doing without asking permission, and leading by example. In this task, the various leaders have no organizational advantage over other people in the swarm. Those who inspire others in a swarm cause things to happen. Put another way, the leaders are not somebody's boss just because they have some responsibility. This is also a key mechanism in swarm organizations. You cannot and should not try to tell anybody in the swarm what to do. Rather, your role is to set goals and ambitions that don't stop short of changing the entire world for the better. So that is the idea with leaders. We want to encourage everybody to take leadership at different points and have a revolving door of leaders where everyone's taking lead at different moments with the skills and things that they're good at, and we can all try to learn from each other. And in addition to that, we also need people who are, you know, specifically tasked with keeping folks together and making stuff happen. So, because we all have to deal with different things at different points in life and in organizing. So anyways, that's it for this video. I hope it made sense. If you have any questions, feel free to comment video here or in the next video. Maybe some questions will be answered. Also, there is always the Hive where you can ask questions to an admin there. In our next video, we will talk about policies. So we'll be talking about security culture, tactics, our communication technique, and our organizing values. So we will see you then.